Namaskar everyone. So today again we will continue reading the Seedbed of Pakistan by Sir Saumya Dey. So before we start reading, I will request everyone to buy this book. From Sir Saumya Dey is a very good scholar and an independent researcher. So please support him by buying his books. You can get it on Amazon, Padega India, and other various platforms. Okay, so let's continue reading from where we left. So today we will continue from here. We ended it the preferred high culture among Indian Muslims. Again, we will start reading how Akbar, like, how the Mughals and others started using Christian who came into the picture. How Muslims are stepping, cultivating it. Oh, by the way, before I start reading, today we have two channel members to us. That is Nina and Rishi, Nina ji and Rishi ji. So today we will take questions and comments, and also there will be a discussion after the reading ends. So please do comment in live chat about what do you think, and if you have any questions, you can ask in English, Hindi, Bengali. Uh, Talk about the aspect of it was also made Persian the language of administration at all levels. Personal power expressed by Persian was the region where he chose to do so. Rebounding further to its status, the Persian language even acquired a kind of religious sanctity among Muslims. One need not imagine that the Islamic status of Persian was a cultural phenomenon only among the lower status Muslims who might uh, wait, मेरा वॉइस में कोई इशू है क्या? चैट में बोलो तुम कुछ समस्या है क्या?
हाँ, हाँ। थोड़ा वो बीच में मतलब वो आई गेस हेवी सा साउंड कर रहा था। एकदम क्लियर नहीं लग रहा। So he will be back in just a moment.
Yes. So greetings to all the audiences right now, and we'll request you all to subscribe and share our content and kindly help us in our endeavor as well, so that we can bring you more and more such content which educates us and our future generations as well. Yeah.
Hello. Is it clear now?
Yes, much better.
Yeah, it's clear.
Oh, okay. Uh, yes, so one need not imagine that the Islamic status of Persian was the Islam cultural phenomenon only among the lower status Muslims who might have been in awe of it. The literate elite who imagined Persian as a Muslim tongue. For example, we learned that Jamaat al-Din Inji, the author of the Persian lexicon Faranghi Jahangiri, dwelt at length on the point that Persian, together with Arabic, was the language of Islam. Anecdotal evidence suggests that the Mughal emperors were actively conscious of the status and cultural power that Persian communicated. A language widely spoken and understood in the Mughal Empire was Hindu, but it was obviously lacked the glamour of Persian. Now, nor was it identified as a language of Islam. That is probably why we see that a puritanical ruler like Aurangzeb, though he knew Hindu, was not very keen on using it. Though he knew Hindu, he was not very keen on using it. Muzaffar Alam tells us that he used Hindu only when he talked with an Indian who knew no Persian or who had poor knowledge of the language, and even this only when it was unavoidable. The Mughal Empire did produce a large crop of Persian literate non-Muslims. A lot of Hindus from the traditional literate caste, Brahmins, Kastas, and Khatris, for example, did take to the language. But since Persian, as we have seen above, carried a charge of political and cultural power that distinctly belonged to the Islamic paradigm, the Persian literate non-Muslims perhaps ought not to be seen as instances of syncretism. Cultural syncretism. To our eyes, it appears that Persian was unable to provide full citizenship to non-Muslims. First, first they must have had to conform to aesthetic standards emanating beyond the borders of India due to the language specific geocultural orientation. Secondly, since Persian was considered the language of Islam, no matter how much felicity they acquired in it, they very likely could never be its true owner. Besides, it seems making a purely expedient choice to equip himself for positions in a political order that is Persian. The Persian literate non-Muslim was also visibly suffering a fate of cultural subordination. Like the Delhi Sultanate, the Mughal state closely associated itself with the spiritual charisma of the Sufis. The Mughal emperors were devotees of the Chishti Sufi sects to the extent that we have Richard Eaton postulating a Mughal Chishti partnership. After setting foot in Delhi, Babur had prayed at the sign of the Chishti Sheikh Bakhtiyar Kaki. His brother-in-law, on the other hand, revealed the tomb of Nizamuddin Aulia. Akbar later constructed his father's tomb near this site. He also chose the hospice of Salim Chisti for his new capital, Fatehpur Sikri. Jahangir and Shahjahan constructed gates and other buildings at or near the foundational Chisti shrine at Ajmer. The Mughal dynasty thus right return vigorously patronized the order of Chisti Sheikhs, believing that their blessings underpinned their worldly success. Could one term the Mughal rulers and their predecessors, the rulers of the Delhi Sultanate, syncretic in their outlook due to their penchant for the Sufi? Well, the Sufis could indeed be sympathetic towards non-Muslim religiosity. They, for example, could approach Hindu cults and creeds with an attitude of understanding and admiration. This was because of the Sufi doctrine of Wadat al-Wajud, unity of being, which inspired a certain amount of Catholicity towards the non-Muslims. The Sufis thus even adopted some of their practices and ideas, demonstrating their ability for religious synthesis and cultural amalgam. But this does not mean that the Sufis were not interested in bringing the non-Muslims into the fold of Islam, like the Islam theologians. That, like the Islam theologians, uh, theologians, the definition and consolidation of Islamic power in the land that the Muslims had conquered was a concern was a concern for the Sufis. Indeed, the Sufis believed in the finality of the Islamic revelation and could assert as much. Sufi Catholicity towards non-Muslim was, as a result, not limitless. It was very circumscribed. Indeed, the Sufis could not completely free themselves from the hegemony of Orthodox Judaistic Islam. A very good example of this inability would be Sheikh Ahmad Sehindi of the Naqshbandi Sufi order. According to S. Nurul Hasan, his life's mission was to establish the supremacy of the Sharia. He even wrote a letter to Jahangir emphasizing that its propagation depended on him. Besides, Sheikh Sehindi carried out his puritanical propaganda in the Mughal army and administration. Jahangir was alarmed and eventually had the Sheikh imprisoned for a while in 1619, probably because he was getting out of hand. Sheikh Sirindi was not so unusual after all, since we come across Sufis who were the dauntless sword bearing champions of Islam in the legends. An example would be the Sufi Qazi Mian, whose grave was venerated by Hindus and Muslims alike. According to the tales that were told about him, Qazi Mia was the Ghaznavid army commander who had waged jihad against the Hindu rulers. So individual Mughal ruler having their Islamic petty informed by the Sufi outlook very likely did not mean that they stopped viewing the non-Muslims as others who signified fundamental cultural differences. The Mughal Empire, we may argue, based on the foregoing, projected power using almost the same symbolic or cultural tropes as the Delhi Sultanate. Notions of sovereignty and royal authority in the Mughal Empire Your Mughal Empire hearkened to Islam as a moral ideal. Mughal sovereigns curtailed the cultural displays of the non-Muslims, and like the Delhi Sultanate, the Mughal Empire was persecuted and associated itself with the spiritual charisma Sufis. The Mughal Empire, thus, was an Islamic state form or cultural power formation in every sense. Having been extremely capable and potent as a cultural power formation for about 150 years, 1556 to 1707, the Mughal Empire left two crucial imprints on North India, its political and geographical core. First, it culturally shaped an entire society. The North Indian Ashraf, the Ashraf were bearers of the Islamic cultural forms and practices and can truly be said to be the inheritors of the cultural legacy of the Mughal Empire. Secondly, the Mughal Empire created Islamic cultural spaces all over North India through the Ashraf. These were the Qasbas. The Ashraf were based in the Qasbas and culturally dominated for culturally dominated them, generating the distinctly Islamic identity. One could say that they replicated in the Qasbati space the specific alliance of culture and power that the Mughal Empire manifested. Let us know in the remainder of this chapter, turn our attention to the Ashraf and the Qasbas and assess them respectively as an Islamic society and cultural space. Now the next part, there is the Ashraf and the Islamic legacy, the Indo-Muslim elite and their culture. Wait a minute. Ashraf is the plural of Sharif. Typically, Muslims claiming the Sharif status also claim foreign ancestry. It made them noble. Thus, Ashraf lineages commonly trace their origins to Arabia, Iran, Afghanistan, or Turkey. Being a literate elite, the Ashraf were very important to the functioning of the Mughal Empire, forming its transferable bureaucracy. As David Nelevant writes, the Mughal administrative system rested on an ability to move such people, Ashraf, around from place to place. Now, this fact lent them an aura of power and exclusivity. The association of the Ashraf with the Mughal Empire linked them with the history with the history of the conquest of and rule over South Asia and its native-born locals. In their subjective perception too, they were the ruling race. This was the well-defined vision of themselves. They shared. The Ashraf had come from abroad to rule. The welding power was their birthright. The culture, the culture that the Ashraf espoused and projected from our point of view was very Islamic. One of the foundations of this culture was the Persian language and the literature that it expressed. The Ashraf were introduced to Persian when still children in some local maktab. This is understandable on account of the close relationship that the Ashraf had with Mughal state, which was, as we saw above, extremely Persian. Literacy in the Persian language must have greatly buttressed the of Ashraf's aura of power, both in a cultural and worldly sense. This is because Muzaffar Alam informs us, the long association of the Mughals and of their supporters and successors with Persian in the fields of political and military management created a memory of the language as an instrument of conquest. Like the Persian Mughal state, the Ashraf too, through the cultivation of Persian, were oriented towards the Islamic and Jew-cultural space. Francis Robinson, for example, points out that nearly all the books, commentaries, and the super commentaries normally used in teaching Persian had been written in Iran or Central Asia between 1100 and 1600. Looking beyond India culturally, the Ashraf seem to have tried hard to psychologically sequester themselves from their immediate cultural and social vicinity. They love to recite the poetry of Rumi and Hafiz, while their own Persian language poetic output was remarkable for a complete rejection of Indian life and landscape. This tendency very likely emerged from the Ashraf self-perception of being a conquering people and their status as a proud governing elite. By deliberately ignoring its its immediate geographical context, it seems the Ashraf authored Persian literary tradition in India, expressing a wish to distance itself from the polluting influence of the subject people. Along with Persian, an integral part of the Ashraf life world was the scriptural knowledge of Islam. As it appears, Ashraf society has seen to Islam as a moral ideal, just as much as the Mughal sovereigns had once done. The Ashraf were introduced to scriptural Islam. Okay, we will take over. ये PDF ले लो ना slide number 73.
Is this the correct page number?
73.
Okay,
73.
okay. So from another language we start.
Oh wait,
Yeah, just check.
did you guys go? Well, you guys are not in the stage for some reason. It must be a glitch. Let me check. Okay. Now it's okay. Okay, continue reading from along with Persian. I'll be back in half an hour. Oh wait, so keep commenting in the
Yes,
live chat. We will take all the comments and questions later in this stream. So comment whatever thoughts you have, etc.
yes, yes. Please do that.
Till
So I
we
will
are
continue reading
we
then.
are also we are joined by Nocturnal Patriot, so he will also be there commenting and reading. So yeah, continue.
Yeah.
Yes. So along with Persian, an integral part of the Ashraf life world was the scriptural knowledge of Islam. As it appears, Ashraf society hearkened to Islam as a moral ideal, just as much as the Mughal sovereigns had once done. The Ashraf were introduced to scriptural Islam very early in their lives. Studying the Quran was essential to the education of a Sharif child. It might be done at home under a male or female tutor, depending on the child's gender, or the reciter of a public mosque. Often, Ashraf children were be taught Arabic grammar and literature as well. Ashraf were thus carriers of formal Islamic knowledge, but they did not ignore the mystical or Sufi traditions of Islam either. Another language that the Ashraf had a penchant for was Urdu, perhaps because it assumed a pronouncedly Persianate character at a point in its development. By the time the British were replacing the Mughals as a ruler, Urdu had become the language of the literate Muslims all over the subcontinent. Ashraf's cultivation of Urdu was again vital from our point of view, since some of its original history was closely linked to that of the Mughal Empire. Urdu very likely had had its beginnings in Punjab following its Ghaznavid conquest. The Muslim ruling class of the Ghaznavid state, as well as soldiers, acquired Eastern Punjabi to communicate with the local population and impregnated it with a large number of Persian words. This hybrid language arrived in Delhi from Punjab after the Ghurid conquest of the city. Urdu was then conveyed to the Deccan by the armies of Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad bin Quli, where it grew to be a literary dialect. Later, Urdu truly became of age in the Deccan sultanates of Golconda and Bijapur. These had emerged in the 16th century and upon the collapse of the Bahmani Sultanate. At the same time, Urdu continued to develop in Delhi. We see that it was called Urdu-yi Mu'alla, or the language of the exalted camp in the second half of the 17th century. I think Mu'alla is Mohalla, so that is the same word. This, we speculate, could have been because Urdu was the preferred argot in the Mughal army. After the Deccan kingdoms were completely annexed by Aurangzeb, there was a drastic change in Urdu in the direction of greater Persianization. Thus came into existence of a highly Persianized imperial Urdu. At the beginning of the 18th century, a number of Mansabdars, members of the Mughal aristocracy based in Delhi, had taken to Urdu verse or Rikta. Some of these poets, as named by Aziz Ahmad, are Sirajuddin Ali Khan Arzu, Shah Hatim, Sharafuddin Majmun, and Muhammad Shakir Najib. Perhaps these pioneers of Urdu verse find Mirza Rafi Sauda and Mir Taqi Mir, the two most well-known Urdu poets that Delhi produced in the 18th century. It was also a time, it seems to us, when Urdu was clearly differentiated from Hindi, as it was deliberately purged of Sanskrit words. Thus, though not officially endorsed by the Mughal Empire, Urdu was nevertheless a part of its history. This makes it an aspect of the culture power formation that was the Mughal Empire. As a matter of fact, Alok Rai writes that upon the ascension of Shah Alam in 1772, Urdu became nominally the language of power. Hence, along with Persian, Urdu was a significant appendage to the Ashraf status. The spatial setting of the Ashraf culture in Raipur was the Pasha, a settlement midway between a village and a town. In the Gangetic Valley, Kasbahs were clustered in the upper Doab and western part of Awadh. Ashraf, whether soldiers, administrators, scholars, or theologians, lived in kasbahs as aggregates of sub-communities, which were often bound together by tight marriage partnerships. The histories of kasbahs seem to have been intrinsically tied together to that of the Ashraf, since, according to C. A. Bailey, the slow growth of power of Muslim service families parallelly formed Kasbati society. Islam, as a form of piety and devotion, determined the ethos of the Kasbah, creating a shared common culture, a common order of life, and a common disposition of mind. Thus, the rituals and ceremonies of popular Islam, such as milads, celebrations of the Prophet's birthday, Muharram observances, the Urs, the death anniversary of a saint, and Fatiha, literally the opening, the first chapter of the Quran, were a major influence on Kasbati life. The Kasbah was thus a clearly Islamic cultural space, all the more because the Mughal Empire's decline had made some Kasbahs the involuntary heirs of the once powerful Indo-Persian culture. This was to extend, we gather from Mushirul Hasan, the Kasbah was less of a geographical expression and more of a cultural and religious unit with a clear Indo-Persian identity, one with a widely shared and recognized cultural traits and patterns behavior. We believe that this was because the Kasbah were spatial setting dominated by the Ashraf. Further, we see that just as the Mughal Imperium, many Kasbahs were associated with the spiritual charisma of Sufis. Amroha was known for the dargahs of Sayyid Sharafuddin Shah Wilayat, Mirza Qazi Sayyid Abdul Latif, and Sheikh Abdul Majid Bilgran, who attained eminence due to some dargahs. Again, Rudauli had been the home of prominent Sufis, notably Sheikh Ahmad Abdul Haq or Makhdoom Sahib. The tombs of Muslim holy men form the moral center of the Kasbah. To what extent did Ashraf society interact with the non-elite Muslim resident in the Kasbah? Polite mingling and formal intercourse between the two groups can frankly be ruled out. But of course, the Ashraf came into social contact with the latter as they provided them with various services. Further, we think that there is sufficient reason to believe that the Islamic high culture professed by the Ashraf, along with the fact that they were the service elite of the Mughal Empire, made the non-elite Muslims look up to them, especially because we observe that the average Muslim emotionally identified with the Mughal state, imagining it to be his own. David Lely-Weld writes of how in 1844, British official named W. H. Sleeman reported that Muslims in general identified with the Mughal dynasty longed for its restoration and conceived of themselves as a former ruling class. To such people, Lely-Weld adds, Mughal rule was Muslim rule. They were the sort of people who assumed that being Muslim had special relationship to the ruling power. The fact that the non-elite Muslims were very likely looked to the Ashraf could have implications for the lives of the non-Muslim inhabitants of the Kasbah. There was, as it seems, always a possibility that non-elite Muslims might spontaneously restrict the cultural displays of the non-Muslims on behalf of the Ashraf. Thus, another way in which the Ashraf dominated Kasbah was redolent of the Mughal Imperium was that was their non-Muslim residents might be forcibly kept from constructing the places of worship. We have this anecdote related by Gyanendra Pandey in his book, The Construction of Communalism in Colonial North India, about how some Muslims in a kasbah in UP sought to keep a Hindu moneylender from constructing a temple. The Muslims of Mubarakpur discovered that one Manohar Das had built a Shivalaya in the compound of his house. They were angry at this and reported the matter to the police. When produced before the magistrate, poor Manohar Das argued that the Muslims of Mubarakpur built mosques and other places of worship wherever they lived without objection from any source. That no more than 5 or 7 uh, months ago, Fakir Kunjra had erected a masjid close to a place that was sacred to the Hindu, and we did not object. Yet the Muslims wished to destroy the small Shivalaya that he had built inside his own house. This was nothing but a show of power and tyranny. To this, Muslim leaders replied that Fakir Kunjra had built it with the permission of us zamindars. All the zamindars from Mubarakpur were Muslims, non-Hindu. So what right had the Hindus to object or allow? In so many words, you might say that Manohar Das kept from constructing a temple by the spontaneous and active collusion of the non-Egyptian Muslims of Mubarakpur and the Ashraf. The Muslims reported Manohar Das's temple to the police. He gets were commoners. Somehow, it is hard to imagine the Ashraf stepping up to do this. Eventually, the matter eventually came up before the magistrate. It is the Ashraf, the likely social identity of the Zamindar, who from the front presented arguments against Manohar Das's right to establish a shrine for his deity. As these Ashraf saw the situation, a Hindu money lender could not construct the temple even in his own courtyard simply because they dominated the Kasbah as Zamindar. There was no doubt in their mind that their supremacy was a co-terminus with the supremacy of Islam in the spatial setting. This is also why they would not hinder an apparently ordinary Muslim like Fakir Kunjar from constructing a mosque in the same locality. The whole affair seems to demonstrate how the Ashraf enforced an Islamicate cultural ambience in the Kasbah, the non-elite Muslims as their acolytes. Ashraf, one enforced, the natural leaders of the Indian Muslim society. They commanded a spontaneous and willing following in its midst. This is the primary reason why we have chosen to refer to them as the Indo-Muslim elite. We do not mean necessarily that the Ashraf are Indianized in culture, only that they seem to have exercised natural hegemony and cultural leadership in Indian Muslim society in general. Yes. As a Rishi or cognitive kernel, do you want to continue from here?
I can take it.
Yeah, this is
I
something.
can take it, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, so, oh, you want comments, right? Cool, cool. I think
Yeah,
Rishi was saying something.
comments and yeah, we can even continue.
Rishi can complete his comment. I'll join. Yeah, you say.
Yeah, it's very surprising. I never knew these things. Like, um, at least this kind of attitude which the so-called the non-ruling class within the Muslim society had of relating themselves to the ruling class by having this notion that we have the same religious identity and we speak a language which has too much of Persianate influence that makes us very much different and very much superior. This was something very new to me. So, wanted you, both of you, to
Also, we see how
say
they are
your
quite capable of forming
thoughts.
a clear nexus, as in the those who are non-ashrafs insist that uh, the elites. I mean, the elites gave them permission to build the temples, build the mosques, while the ashrafs naturally fight the case for them. So, in both ways, they help in
Wow.
establishing this Islamicate so that only their interests get looked after, while those of non Muslims either get sidelined or absolutely obliterated. Also, interestingly, the term Kasbah is still popular today. You have these
Yeah.
places called Nagar Kasbah or Kasbah in
Small
different
cities are called kasbah in
exactly
UP and Bihar.
in Bihar, even in Bengal, even Kolkata, there are places called Kasbah. So
Yes.
the term Kasbah, at least the way we tend to the version presented to us is a place where wealthy people live, a place where
Ah,
established people live. Now we see what it actually was. So that is
these
that.
actually throw a light on our own life as well, right? Or ignorance that we have of certain places that we actually go through. Like in various cities, like in Kolkata, we have certain places called Koshba. We
Exactly.
go through there, we see, we think of it as okay, it's just another place. But no, it has a very, uh, what should I say, a very
A dark past.
elite, a dark past here.
Because the
Didn't
name
know
is
what
quite
kind of
old. The
attributes
name
should I
is
put,
quite old.
but
It probably used to be a kasbah before. I mean, a proper kasbah before this, because all these areas
indeed,
had significantly high Muslim populations. Together, that population is yet again increasing. So that is there,
absolutely, absolutely.
and it also tells us like there are a few people, myopic people, who hold on to this impression that education can cure everything, or provide them with education and help them progress in life, and they will turn their sights towards finer things in life and abandon uh, groupism and lobbyism. But none of that is going to happen, as the past has clearly indicated. The Ashraf class was created to look after the interests of Islam, and to create this sort of nexus that helped them further their interests and create this Islamic aid. So they work hand in hand, the Ashrafs and the non-Ashrafs.
And did you notice something? Like even at that time, when British have come and Hindus are starting to feel independent, they couldn't even make their own temples in their own property as well because it's enraging some set of people
Precisely.
out there.
Precisely.
So the all the blame has to be on the Hindu, and he has to tolerate, whereas the other party doesn't have to at all whatsoever.
Yes. And as they say, like they have, I mean, their premise is that Islam happens to be a supreme faith, and therefore Islam can get away with this. It's pretty valid for them to
Hmm.
force this on any non-Muslim around.
So true, so true. Also, did you notice when admin was reading the first portion, so he said about how even if the non-Muslims were getting educated in Persian, they still had a lot of issues because they were still feeling themselves as alien, even within the ruling class
Right.
itself. They could
Yes.
not actually syncretize.
And I mean, the ruling class also found ways to keep them separate, to make them feel alien, basically. So to keep them at a distance, to
Indeed.
even like wherever possible to stop them from gaining promotions and so on.
Yep, 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 absolutely. Yes, Nocturnal.
Yeah,
You can go on.
I think I can continue reading from here. So threats to the Indo-Muslim elite, right? That's where we are.
Yep, yep.
The Manohar
Yes,
Das
yes.
episode notwithstanding, as we shall see in the next chapter, the Indo-Muslim elite were rapidly ceasing to be a privileged and dominant minority in the 19th century. Firstly, they were threatened in the administrative roles they discharged, as well as in their position as land controllers, and and fell on relatively bad days. Secondly, they scroll ceased to dominate the urban spaces they inhabited and no longer set uh, its cultural register. Eventually, maybe taking an expedient view of their situation, the Indo Muslim elite sought to make peace or establish some sort of modus vivendi with the colonial rule through the hybrid seminary at Deoband and the vernacular modernity it embodied. So, to use vernacular to reach out to the others. Yeah. Later, as they could not anymore naturally expect government employees due to their breeding alone, they launched a rather awkward project of Western inspired Islamic modernity in the form of the college at Aligarh. This institution was also meant to be a clearer enunciation of their and broader Indian Muslim society's reconciliation with the British rule. Finally, the outbreak of cultural conflicts as Hindus increasingly asserted their cultural symbols against the backdrop of the introduction of local self government jeopardized the broad social hegemony of the Islamicate cultural paradigm that the Indo Muslim elites represented. The only thing that unambiguously worked in their favor in the 19th century was perhaps the puritanical reforms they undertook. These, it seems, further bulwarked their leadership position in Indian Muslim society as they made the non elite Muslims very conscious of their Islamic identity. So we see the role that was played by the Islamic elite, the educated Islamic elite. Next page. The
Indeed.
Indo Muslim elite in
Which
the
is very
19th.
different from our.
Precisely. In our case, the more educated people have become, they become more and more deracinated. In their cases, the more educated they become the spokespersons on what Islamic law should be.
Yeah,
So they become the
they more
spokespersons on religious
they,
law.
Essentially, they don't
yeah,
forget their, you can say, their goals.
They
yeah,
merely
they go
become
full throttle, right?
exactly. They become I mean they merely become better authorities and more well versed in the scriptures, as it seems. And like their version gets recognized as the more authoritative version. That is just all there is to it. Because XYZ is educated. And it's not that they compromise the version to, make it suit their own lifestyles. No, they stick to the most radical portion they can.
Yep.
So the Indo-Muslim elite in the 19th century, insecurities, cultural conflicts, the Islamicate imperiled. An insecure age. We find the Mughal administration in a rather tumble down state in the major urban centers of North India at the turn of the 19th century. And when they say North India, uh, primarily UP, uh, I guess parts of Delhi, of course, and this also applies to Islamic centers in Rajasthan and Bengal. Basically, consider the Gangetic belt, the entire Gangetic belt, the plains which were dominated by these people. Uh, in the major urban centers of North India at the turn of the 19th century. This must mean that the Indo Muslim elite or the Ashraf were witnessing a major erosion of their authority. They were, after all, as we saw in the previous chapter, the administrative vanguard of the Mughal Empire. So, yes, they were the Sarkari Babus back then. As seen by C.A. Bailey, the citywide institutions of the Indo Islamic traditions were now in decline. Apparently, this was because the officials who discharged the police and judicial functions of the Mughal urban administration, namely the Kotwal and the Qazi, had been the Qazi being the judge and the Kotwal being the police, had been losing their moral authority. Next. For the preceding many decades. For example, when disputes arose over the Jnanvapi Mosque in Benares and the Suleiman Mosque in Ayodhya, some Muslim law officers supported their co-religionists, not much has changed today, and forfeited the confidence of Hindu residents. While the Kotwali and Qazi lost credibility, the Hindu elite grew proportionately powerful. As C.A. Bailey writes, the princelings of the new Hindu house of Benares began to assert their jurisdiction over bazaars. The East India Company, too, enjoying the Diwani rights in 1764, was growing concomitantly powerful and undermined the institutional symbols of Muslim power for understandable reasons. After Lord Cornwallis's reorganization of the EIC administration, it became all too clear that Muslims would not be the subordinate partners of the British, but merely subordinates. So, although they wanted to be partners, British made it very clear that they would no longer be partners. The term subordinate was emphasized clearly. In 1790, Cornwallis abolished the post of Naib Nizam, dismissed Muslim judges, and reconstituted the Nizamat Adalat with Europeans, after moving it to Calcutta. In the words of Bailey, the utilitarian approach of British magistrates and law courts abolished whole areas of the moral and social jurisdiction of the Kotwals, the Qazis, and the Muftis. In the face of the relentless approach of a new regime of power, these old representatives of Mughal authority became acutely aware that Muslims and Islam no more rule the land. We learned that when the British levied a house tax in Bareilly in 1816, the Mufti of the city saw it as the imposition of a sort of jizya on the Muslims. He was convinced that this Christian tax symbolized the end of Muslim political dominance. As the Indo Muslim elite were increasingly hamstrung as administrators, the power equilibrium that hitherto existed between the Hindus and Muslims in North India, it seems, was quickly giving way. This indicated this is indicated by the frequent outbreaks of communal clashes over the 1820s and 30s. So now we know what was the root cause of the communal clashes back then. Administrative reasons. Administrative insecurity. We learn from Bailey that
Yep.
Hindus and Muslims came to blow at Benares, Koil, Benares in 1809 to 1815, Koil in 1820, Moradabad, Sambhal, Kashipur, Shahjahanpur 1837, Bareilly, Kanpur, and Allahabad 1837 to 52. The relative eclipse and weakening of the authority of the Qazis, Muftis, and Kotwalis. So basically, they don't riot, they don't rebel where they are in power. Where they are not, they use these to attain what they want, as becomes clear. Uh, if others wanted to comment.
Yep. This sort of tactic we see even in modern India as well, right? Uh, so street power is the only way to get their demands met by,
And this is
like
what
they do not have any
they've
chance
been
of
using
doing
for
that
time
with
immemorial.
legal process.
Using the numbers to bring street power and basically show aggression on the streets. They either use legal
Absolutely.
power or they use street power. If they don't have legal power, they use street power.
Yeah. And even in case of legal power, you see, right, that they
Capture
require,
the entire system.
uh, yeah, and in that, the idea of appealing to logic, that is not there. It
Oh,
seems
no.
like they have to appeal to superiority.
It's
कि
perfectly
हम
justified in their
हम
books.
Yep. And because they cannot get that, so organize and do ruckus and get your demands met. But in modern state, that is a very, very bad decision to make, because violence is solely rested in state, as we know.
Which is
That's
why
a social contract,
they
and
never respect any constitution or any nation's authority on them. It's very easy
yeah,
for them to make a sort of clique or a separate identity and a cohesive group and pretend that they are you know a discrete identity who follows a discrete set of rules and so on. The relative eclipse
and
and weakening of the authority of the Qazis, Muftis, and Kotwals, representatives of the old regime, was the very likely cause behind these outbreaks of violence. According to Bailey, and as we know, even in the case of like the communal violence in Noakhali and so on, we see that the people involved were Muslim magistrates. Muslim magistrates were involved in rallying people for the communal clashes and spreading of rumors.
absolutely,
So the Ashrafs used their positions in spreading rumors, and rumors spread by the Ashrafs would be believed because they came from people of authority and so on.
Hmm. So that sort of relation never went away, I suppose.
Yes,
The division never came within them.
very true. According to Bailey, the European police and magistracy played one off against the other while reducing their influence. Can the comment be removed? Yeah. Ah, yes. As the old Muslims' service elite declined, new social groups ascended and filled the power vacuum left by them. Bailey gives examples of Agarwal Banyas around Kanpur and Chobes in the Mathura region. There were now in the North Indian urban context significant numbers of upwardly mobile Hindus, which is their nightmare, the nightmare of these Muslim elite, who were culturally
Yep.
assertive. Bailey relates how once in 1838 the Hindu, next page, Talukdari, Talukdari settlements of Thomason and Bird. No, I think you missed a page. Hindu commercial community in Rewari, a town north of Delhi, sought to coerce the local Muslims to give, there you see, to give up the slaughter of animals by conducting a hartal and denying them food. So, yes, the Hindus did try to assert their identity.
Hmm.
In Delhi itself, we are told sporadic
Yep.
communal violence occurred in the early colonial period on account of the growing power and wealth of merchant communities. The Islamicate character of the erstwhile centers of Muslim power was clearly under concerted assault. The old Indian Indo-Muslim elite who left their stamp on these places through the exercise of political and administrative power were now being challenged, even physically threatened. So this is why Pakistan came to be. They wanted to revive this system, and they only wanted a system where
Yep.
such, you know, notions would prevail. Even physically threatened by
Exactly.
the
And
increasingly aggressive votaries and representatives of the Hindu way of life, something they despised. Just as in judicial and political and police administration, it appears that the Indo-Muslim elite often found the going difficult as revenue intermediaries and a landed class after the onset of the company rule. Peter Hardy writes that the power and influence of the Muslim landlords persisted well into the 20th century in northwestern provinces, today's western Uttar Pradesh. This is no doubt a broad reality, as we shall see above. However, it is also true that in many cases Muslims suffered significant setbacks as land controllers under the new administration. This, ironically, might be because they preponderated in this role in the Gangetic Plains. As I said, the Gangetic Plains are the areas we should focus on. Those are being talked about. Take, for instance, the anti-Talukdari settlements of Thomason and Bird that Bailey refers to. These initiatives try to deprive the Talukdars, the Muslim Talukdars, of large proportion of their revenue engaging rights and handed them over to a variety of village magnates. Since Muslims were very numerous as revenue intermediaries in the Gangetic heartland, it seems many had even converted from Hinduism to Islam in order to gather these rights in the first place.
yep. So as to have a subsistence at that time, or else they
Yes,
would have suffered.
exactly, to climb higher in the social rung, and suddenly they were being denied of these rights they had once been, having the monopoly over. It seems safe to assume that they were the ones most affected. As a matter of fact, even in
Yep.
Awadh, which did now come under British rule till 1856, which did not come under British rule until 1856, Muslims were facing difficulties as revenue intermediaries. So they were once the middlemen, the only middlemen, and now they no longer could be the only middlemen. They no longer could basically embezzle money that they were probably once doing.
Yep.
Bailey writes that the hold of small town Islamic gentry over revenue rights had already weakened before the annexation of Awadh by the British in 1858. When Wajid Ali Shah ruled the realm, for example, the small Kasbah zamindars were an embattled lot. According to Bailey, both the regime and the rural Rajput clans, in the process of resuscitating their power, were exerting pressure on them. Simultaneous to the reviving vigor of the Hindu landowning castes, it appears was the rise of Hindu merchant groups, uh, probably the Marwaris, who are so criticized by the elites.
Yep. And Agarwals.
Exactly.
Agarwals are Marwadis. Yeah, mostly.
Seemingly, the two groups were effectively challenged. Seeming the two groups were very effectively challenged the Islamicate character of the Awadhi Kasbahs. Bailey mentions how in Sandila, a town in the erstwhile kingdom of, I guess Sandila would have come from Shandil. Anyway, Sandila, a town Yeah, in the erstwhile kingdom of Awadh, not a single Hindu temple could be built in the last quarter of the 19th century. So there. Later, however, explain. As he puts, the reassertion of Hindu tradition was forceful. One part of India where the situation of Muslims was unambiguously bad in land and revenue administration was Bengal. So there they were not
Hmm.
represented in proportion to their numbers in the new landlord class that was created by the company administration. According to Hardy, the permanent settlement meant the virtual closing of the door to the landlordism of the Muslims. The majority who were engaged by the East India Company in Bengal for the payment of revenue were Hindus, since they were zamindars in the Mughal sense, or revenue farmers. In Western India, in the Maratha country too, Muslims appear to have fared badly as landed class. Muslim Jaigirdars found their jagirs under critical scrutiny, detailed inquisition, and with frequent resumption and commutation to pension. Thus, we find that the worldly fortunes of the Indo Muslim elite suffered a perceptible decline under British rule. Nevertheless, let it also be clear that it was only a relative decline. In the former center of Indo Muslim power, that is the Gangetic heartland, Muslims continued to be well represented in land ownership and government jobs. For example, Francis Robinson writes that Muslims were a major landholding group in the United Provinces, along with Hindu Rajputs, Brahmins, next slide, Banyas, and Kayasthas. The castes are important to me. I mean, they are noteworthy. They also held 35% of all government posts in the provinces in 1882, as far as the upper strata of the Indian Muslim society were concerned. The sense of cultural loss and humiliation might have been more galling than any reduction of means. British rule left the Indo-Muslim elite not economically but psychologically insecure. Hardy, for example, writes that a minority of Indian Muslims lost not a livelihood but a way of life to the British rule, and that it damaged not so much their pockets as their pride. This sounds very plausible, since, as we saw, British rule was emboldening ascendant Hindu groups to challenge the former hegemony of the Indo Muslim elite in the urban spaces of North India. On the other hand, we find Hardy writing that the British had nothing but scorn for the Mughal past and Mughal present, and put no premium on gentility and poetry and those who did not live laborious lives. So, of course, back then,
Wow.
there were Muslim elite who did not need to work at all and simply sat and composed poems. British
Hmm.
did not value these, and therefore the Muslim elite
Yeah.
were angry. In other
An
words,
industrious, meritorious class, why would they even support such frivolous hobbies of all
precisely,
things?
which is why the British have rightly been called a nation
They
of
were running
shopkeepers.
a company. They were running a company, and these people were basically just freeloaders.
In other words, precisely the heritage and lifestyle of the Indo-Muslim elite or the Ashraf became sort of obsolete or defunct in the present dispensation. As the Mughal Empire
Yep.
gradually weakened and withered away, one perceives considerable psychological trauma among the custodians of the spiritual and intellectual heritage of Islam. Do we see a similar phenomenon today among the Bhadralok as the CPIM declines?
Yep.
Yep, yep.
The Muslim divines, so yes, the priests and scholars, or the ulema, another component of the Indo-Muslim elite society, felt the loss very sharply as the alien regime replaced the Mughal Empire. It spelled the end of the formal political and cultural paramountcy of Islam in the Indian context. Without a court as its protector and patron, the Indian ulema became conscious of the responsibility of guarding the intellectual heritage of Islam. The idea bestirred the seminary at Farangi Mahal, I guess that would be like similar to Firangi Mahal, as well as an individual scholar such as Shah Waliullah in the 18th century. Around the middle of the 18th century, the Farangi Mahal ulema systematized and created an exhaustive curriculum of Islamic education. One assumes that in terms of content, it was as orthodox as it could get. So when their elites systematize education, they attempt to make it as orthodox as they can, rather than sanitizing and liberalizing it.
Unlike ours.
Exactly. One assumes that in terms of content, it was as orthodox as it could get. This is because Farangi Mahallis, as Francis Robbins calls them, was so puritanically inclined as to live in deliberate ignorance of the preponderant Indian religion. So, yes, they deliberately wanted to ignore the Hindus. They had, since their arrival in Lucknow in the late 17th century, been largely able to ignore the Hindu world about them. So, this was regarded an accomplishment. The Farangi Mahallis thus lived a sequestered world of their own and sought to serve Islam through a purity of cultural vision and conduct. Shah Waliullah, on the other hand, understood and sought to serve the interests of Islam politically. He was concerned by the he was concerned by the absence of a khilafat and a stable Muslim monarchy in the age. Here, he, we learn, resultantly wrote to multiple Muslim rulers, that of Hyderabad, Rohila and even Afghanistan, exhorting them to take on the required role of the leader of the faithful. Shah Waliullah had envisioned an enlightened Muslim leadership that would be guided by a responsible ulema. His exhortations to the Muslim rulers unfortunately bore no fruit. Barbara de Metcalfe notices two concomitant tendencies among the Indian ulema in the 19th century. First, they focused more on the study of legal codes, fiqh, I think, and drafting of legal opinion, fatwa, for increasing numbers of individual Muslims. Secondly, several of the ulema sought to create a new Islamic order through jihad. Thus, they attempted to foment military uh, revolts on the borders of the erstwhile Mughal Empire. So this resembles, basically, for those who are familiar with Game of Thrones, the priests wanted to create a faith militant that would help them, create maintain a zealot body. So yeah, thus they attempted to foment military revolt on the borders of the erstwhile Mughal Empire. The resentment of the ulema is understandable in the light of the fact that the new state, on account of its non-Islamic character, did not prominently accommodate them in its power structure. For instance, what was once a Muslim law was turned into Anglo Mohammedan law in the legal administration of colonial Bengal. In terms of the law of evidence and the way it interpreted of offences against the state, Anglo Mohammedan law, Metcalfe writes, was mainly British and not Muslim. Okay, another reason for them to be bitter about it. Understandably, it was administered by British officials, though they initially took the help of local scholars.
Yeah.
Denied a substantial role by the new state, the ulema withdrew into a reflective mood. Seemingly, the more acute and sensitive among them sought to rediscover their relevance in relation to the community of believers. Shah Abdul Aziz, 1746 to 1824, the eldest son of Shah Waliullah, for example, hoped to transform the lives of Muslims through scholarly guidance. Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi was a radical. According to Metcalfe, his idea was to destroy society itself and build it anew on a just and egalitarian basis. It seems that he wanted to completely
Wow.
refashion Indian Islam in a puritanical mold. Sayyid Ahmad began an so this might be Sayyid Ahmad Khan. Sayyid Ahmad began an ardent campaign to purge Indian Islam of abuses, such as invoking the intercession of saints, apostles, imams, martyrs, angels, and fairies, along with the keeping of taziyas, after the fashion of the Shias. He followed up these efforts at reform by launching a jihad from the tribal areas of the northwest. It was initially directed against Sikh kingdom. No, this is a different Sayyid Ahmad, it seems. Yeah, which he accused of interfering with Muslim religious life. So they had a grouse with the Sikhs as well. Sayyid Ahmad met his end at the hands of the Sikhs at Balakot in 1831.
Oh,
Puritanical Islamic reform and militancy had their votaries at the other extremity of Bengal, of India and Bengal. Haji Shariatullah and Titumir, okay, names we know very well, were exact contemporaries and addressed the Muslim society of rural Bengal. The former sorry, launched a movement called Fardizi, from Fars, Arabic, for fundamentals. Its objective was
No,
to
it is
teach the Bengali.
Faraizi. Faraizi.
Oh, Faraizi, my bad. Yeah,
Faraizi. Like
yeah,
that.
Faraizi. Its objective was to teach the Bengali Muslims correct Islamic observances by emphasizing the fundamentals of Islam. The extent of Shariatullah's radicalism and abhorrence for British rule was that he termed Bengal Dar al Harb, or land of war, where each celebration and Friday prayers were illicit. These could be conducted again by the Muslims of Bengal, thought he, once the land was restored to Muslim rule. A lot of it is, I mean, is striking familiar because it remains central to their narrative even today. Titumir
Absolutely. This
led a
also happened.
jackery of sorts of Bengali Muslim peasants against their Hindu zamindars and the colonial state. He too urged his followers to take proper Islamic names and keep beards. He also forbade them from paying the cesses that the Hindu zamindars levied for conducting or sponsoring Hindu religious festivities. Titu was killed in an encounter with East India Company's troops. Rafiud, Rafiuddin Ahmad suggests that the reforming ulema were seeking to restore the power Muslims had lost in India and the same Tetumir gets glorified by communists as a rebel against the rich, which he totally was not. He was merely trying to build an insurgency. So
Hmm.
Rafiuddin Ahmad suggests that the reforming ulema were seeking to restore the power Muslims had lost in India through a return to the primitive purity of Islam. They wanted to revive the primacy of radical Islam. They attributed the political, social, and economical disasters that Indian Muslims had experienced to their religious degeneration. The ulema thus embarked on a program of the spiritual regeneration of Indian Muslims while also defending Islam against its enemies. Was there any substantial change in Indian Islam in the process? There was indeed. Peter Hardy writes that the reform movements rejected medieval Islam in India in favor of early Muslim in Arabia. By bypassing, okay, so they rejected Indian Islam and chose early Arabic Islam. Wow, what a masterstroke. By bypassing its medieval intellectual legacy, one might argue, hearkening to Francis Robinson, our reformers were seeking to go back to the pristine beginnings of Islam by making contact with the Quran and the Hadith afresh. They were also attempting to make them relevant to the modern world. How is ancient Arabic Islam relevant to the modern world when it was made for a desert setting? I do not understand.
Yeah, they will say it's eternal and so on. Eternal word of God, therefore it's always valid and so on. You know the usual stuff that they say.
Oh yes, that the Quran came directly from their creator. So yeah, and so on, and nothing was ever
Yeah, yeah.
modified or manipulated or edited. They were also attempting to make them relevant to the modern world. This made them, in present day terms, activists. What we ought to be mindful of is that the militant Muslim Puritans were not so many sequestered scholars. Not not was their reform, nor was their reform a set of intellectual formulations that they quietly arrived at in private. They went out among Indian Muslims, influenced and won followers among them. Thus, Hardy's view that they helped to transform Muslim attitudes towards Hindus seems very reasonable. He observes how the Puritan Muslim reformers sought to reform the local elements in Indian Islam, such as seeking the intercession of saints, vegetarianism, consulting Brahmins, and dislike of widow remarriage. Their audience therefore became aware of what they did not share with their non-Muslim neighbors. They were made to feel, Hardy writes tellingly, that India was their habitat and not home. In terms of cultural
Okay,
practices,
so
I don't
yeah,
know. So
okay, okay.
we'll stop here only. There is
There's some issues with the voice, audio. If
uh,
someone can check.
I can I can clearly hear everyone so far.
Okay, okay. So, Patriot, I think we can end
Okay,
on
sure,
this. Yeah,
sure.
Admin, you
can
wanted
you
to
hear
say
me?
something?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. So, okay, we will end it here only. I mean, we have to keep it than the 1 hour bar. It will,
Admin can't be heard.
Yeah, there might be some technical issues. Okay, admin is back.
okay. So we'll keep it under. My voice is clear, correct?
Yes, clear.
Doctor? Yes,
Yes,
okay.
clear, clear,
So
clear.
we'll keep it under 1 hour bar only. So, like, if it becomes 1.5 hour or 2 hours, then people doesn't listen to it. Yeah.
So we can take any questions if there are any, in case there are.
Is there any? Okay, so there is one. So it seems that saying these Sarif people were somewhat like the Bengali Bhadralok, people of high birth, social standing, and high pedigree. Yeah, kind of like that. Except they used to they used to bring their acceptance or the like the level of superiority and everything from outside. Like they are noble because they're outside driven. Okay, others can comment on.
Huh. There is one single difference that I'm noticing in this. Maybe all of you can comment on this. So, in case of
Yes.
Bengali Bhadralok, there is a very significant difference of alienation from the rest of society. So, Bengali Bhadralok always tends to make it clear that he or she is different from the other Hindus or other folks, whereas they are the superior ones and they shall always remain superior ones, and the others should imbibe them, and they have no duty or no responsibility to be in touch with the other. Whereas in case of Muslim elites, which I'm seeing right now, Patriot and Nainer and admin can comment on this. They were also helping the so-called non-ruling classes as well, right? In their endeavors, like if they wanted to make a masjid, they would come and help in adjudicating that process faster if they could, because they saw this as a way to have relations with the so-called non-ruling people, and also have uh, an influence over them as well, right? That
Precisely,
they can exert at any point of time. Yeah,
precisely.
please, you can comment.
So in a way, this society, we truly had the elites cooperating with the non-elites. Something we don't see in structures where elites embrace alien ways to differentiate themselves from the non-elite. The phenomenon which we see in the Bhadralok people. They embrace the exotic. They embrace, the ways of the sahib to show themselves as brown sahibs because they want to show themselves different
Mm.
from the non-elite.
So
The
also beside that, these Sarif, they are also elite. No, so there is a very similarity between overall like globalized elites. I mean, Nina can comment on it. There's a good paper written on it. How post-industrial elites are very much similar worldwide. So
precisely,
as you can see that Sarif and Ashrafs, they are also they used to think their superiority in governing. That they are born to govern and kind of like that. And also this you can see that this Bengali Bhadralok and the other, if they even do not accept overtly that we are here to govern and all, but their internal motives or that even their unwanted intuition is like uh, is that only that we need to govern. I mean, we are here to govern. We are here to like dictate. and like, to create policies and other stuff.
Yes.
The people should
I think
be
admin's audio is cutting off a bit in the middle.
fine.
Yes, there's an issue with your audio, I think. Oh, ho, ho.
Yeah,
Rishi,
Nina,
uh,
any comments you have
sir,
Yeah.
any
on
comments?
this? On
Yes, yes.
any difference or any similarity vis-a-vis
I think
Sharif
a
and
comment just came
Wali Muhammad?
in the chat. I'll put it here.
Okay.
A more
Okay.
accurate analogy would be behavior of the Sunni elites to Shias if you are trying to compare how Muslims look at other non-elite Hindus.
Yeah.
I
Okay, this
guess,
is a good.
yeah, because their aspirations are different in a sense.
Mhm.
Mm.
Non-elite Muslim. Okay, okay,
And the
okay, okay. Yeah, okay,
mm.
got that.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And the
No,
Sunni elites will have a sort of disdain
uh,
for the Shias.
no, but no, no, no,
Mm.
no. Okay, so further in this book, I think we will read about Sunnis also, and Sunnis are not just lower strata Muslims. Sunnis also hold some class of elite who behave very similar to CR, like the Ashraf we are talking about. So yeah, but we can say like as the Sunnis like they have that atrocity thing that we have been oppressed, we have been oppressed and all. Yeah, we can say that. And
Right.
also we have I think
Again, we can't.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so while the comments are being searched, we'll just give this uh, reminder to the audience. This is a uh, what should I
Yeah,
say?
British,
This is
British
a
government in
uh,
1990s reversed this. Okay, so they went on overdrive with tacitly supporting Muslims. So the British government in 1890 started supporting the Muslims. Any comments on that?
yeah. It's
I
after.
think this is covered later in the book itself.
Hmm. Yeah, we
Mhm,
haven't reached the end of the book yet, so we
maybe.
just read a portion. But yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, so just wanted to convey this to the audience because someone may have some sort of misgivings, the usual ones. So uh, it's it's a discussion, it's an intellectual discussion, today's podcast. So we are not intending to hurt any sentiments. Uh, if someone gets it, we are very sorry. We did not have such misgivings towards you. That's what I wanted to just say. So, any
precisely.
last comments you all have? Hmm,
Oh, I don't think any comments are there as well.
true. Patriot.
None from
Anything
me as well.
on? Okay. So, I guess today's podcast ends with this. Okay. Someone has commented.
Oh,
Oh, too early to say that. Okay.
Okay. He might be commenting on my reminder. And
Yes, so okay, so we can end it now. Okay, so if people are finding it informative and helpful, then we obviously continue it. Hopefully, 1 hour stream will be good. We will finish it in 5 parts, I guess. More 5 parts. But, we are almost halfway there, like finished till 93. Even though we not been meeting,
again, the audio is
so
cutting.
yeah.
I think admin has audio issues still. But yeah, we can
yeah.
wrap it up here.
So I guess with this. we end our stream for today. Thank you so much, audience, for joining us and interacting with us as well. We shall see you again with many more content because many episodes are going to come up uh, on this book as well and other many topics which are very spicy, if I could say so. Mm. Yeah,
Very well.
admin can